Hello, good people. Once again, welcome to my channel where I seek to provide Oracle-related content for your personal and professional development. And if you've been sticking with us along this journey, we have finally gotten to the last video on our series on how to, create an Oracle RAC cluster and eventually deploy an Oracle database 12c release 2. Again, like I said, if you like our videos, go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and enable notifications so that you stay informed of when we release new content. So again, like I said, this is the last video on our series to deploy a RAC cluster. And the first 4 videos, we configured a Linux server, cloned that server, configured network and hostname settings, allocated shared memory to be used for ASM, and finally successfully installed Oracle Grid Infrastructure 12c Release 2. So this final video, we will deploy an Oracle RAC database. So let's go right ahead into our project and finish. So again, on RAC Note 1, if you've been following the videos, we had created a stage location where we had unzipped the database software, and unzipping that database software creates a folder database where we can use that run installer in here to kind of install the database software. So it's going to be in 2 parts, right? We're first of all going to install the database software. And the second part, we're going to run DBC, the database configuration assistant, to create a new 12c release 2 2-node database. So with 2 instances, each running on each node. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, in the previous videos, we had already deployed our Oracle database pre-install 12c release 2 YUM package, which kind of set, the kernel parameters and created the necessary users. So if you want to get some review on that, please go ahead and watch that video. That would have been the second video. So let's go ahead and do our run installer in order to go ahead and create or install our Oracle 12c software. So let's give it some time. It should come okay shortly. All right, so we don't have Oracle support for this service, so we would uncheck this. It's going to yell at us, but that's okay. We are not going to use that. So what we are going to do is to install the database software only. So let's go ahead and do that. And we are going to install a real application cluster database installation. Now we're going to select the nodes. Already node 1 was selected by default because that's where we launched it. But node 2, we just want to make sure that this is checked as well. So let's go ahead and proceed. It's going to do a passwordless SSH. This is where all of it is falling into place. SSH performance is detected to be slow, which may impact performance during the remote operations, like copying the software. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I know password SSH has been set up. So let's go ahead and proceed. And I think if you were watching the last video on the grid installation, I am pretty much certain that this is one of the reasons why it was requesting for us to grant a little bit more memory, because eventually when we start running databases, it becomes a little slower, but that's what we have and that's what we gave. So we would be able to deal with this as we move forward. So Enterprise Edition would be what I would choose. Now, if you remember, when we were doing the allocation for, or was it the allocation or the installation for grid, I did mention, oh no, it was the video on the allocation. I did mention here that when we were creating the file locations, that might not be in this one. It might be in the installation video. Or maybe in the cloning video, sorry, because we had to create those and clone them as well. I did mention here that we didn't create a location for the database home. And if you proceed, it would default to this. But I would like to have a different location for my Oracle home. So let me go over here. I would duplicate the Oracle tab, and then I would make that directory and use it. So I would use a make dir u01 app Oracle product 12.2.0.1 db home _1. Now, I will have to use the -p, otherwise this is not going to work. And I would make sure that I do the same thing on node 2. So I will SSH to rack node 2. And then I would run the same command and make the same directory in rack node 2. So I want to make sure that I take this location. I would bring it back over to my Oracle Universal Installer. I would browse for this and make sure that I choose that location. I could just Control V and paste it, but I'm doing this just to make sure that everybody understands what I'm doing. Oracle product 1201 DB home. That's where I want my binaries to be copied to. It's taking its time. I guess we're using quite a lot of resources in the back end. Okay. All right, so I'm not sure, it took quite a little bit of time. I would leave these defaults because Oracle is part of all of these groups. So I would just leave the defaults alone and let's keep going. I hope this one doesn't take too long as well. We're running prerequisite checks at this point. All right, so group membership, ASM DBA, fixable, yes. This is a prerequisite condition to test whether the Oracle is a member of this. So let me run a fix up. It should generate a fix up, run it, and then make sure that we get that done. So I don't have a root session open, but I can open one for sure. So I have to start off with the node 2. That's what it says right here. Nodes 2 and then rack node 1. So I will start off with rack node 2 and run the fix up. And then I would SSH to rack node 1. Okay, and then I'll run that script there as well. Okay, and then I can now return, and then I hit OK on this one, and then continue to monitor. If it fixes that, I'm sure it does. Okay, so that was fixed, but the rest of them are not fixable, so I will ignore them. I will ignore this and move forward. So I would continue, and that is a summary. So software only, that is a location, and then we go, here we go, install. Now the software location typically doesn't take too long. I'll move this side by side here. That way I can open up a details page so that we see what's going on behind the scenes. I'm using up a lot of memory, so that's kind of why that's going that way. Let's take a look here and see configuration logs. Of course, if you want to tail these logs, you could always duplicate this session. And then tail -F. There are inventory logs to see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. It's currently extracting the files to the new Oracle home. And then eventually it's going to copy the files to the remote host. I'll just be quiet here while we watch that progress. All right, so we should be getting to the end. In a little bit, we're going to execute root scripts. So we should be getting closer to the end of this database software installation. All right, here we are at the root script. So we're going to execute on RAC node 1 and RAC node 2. And we are going to execute as the user root. So we do certainly have a root session open up here, but this is, okay, so this is RAC node 1. So we're going to start off with RAC node 1, executing our root scripts, and we're not going to change that location. All right, so we don't need to override anything. Let's exit out of this. And we are back. Remember, we had SSH from node 2 to node 1. And then we're going to run this root scripts on node 2. So we are not going to change anything. No need to override. And then we're going to head back over to our installation as per the instructions and hit OK. So database installation was successful. So we're going to close out of this. And right here, this is where we launched that installation. So we are back. So the database software has been installed. So for us to be able to install the, to configure our database, just to be on the safe side, I want to set some environmental variables. So I'm going to export my Oracle home, which I know to be U01 app, Oracle product 12.2.0.1 db home _1. So that would be my Oracle home. So I would export my path variable as well to Oracle home bin location, and then the path variable, the original path variable itself. So let's echo these variables and see what we set at. Oracle home. That's our Oracle home. So let's echo our path variable as well. So our path variable has our Oracle home bin and that. So now I would just to be safe, which DBCA, which database configuration assistant is going to find that database configuration assistant in our 12 home. So let's launch our DBCA then. Okay. Okay, good. And let's follow our prompts. We're going to create a database. Advanced configuration. It's going to be a real application cluster database, admin managed. We don't have server pools, so we're going to use the admin managed. We're going to use the general purpose transaction. Let me go back up here 1 minute to see, okay, advanced configuration. So let's go. RAC node 1 and RAC node 2, so let's go. Database identification. So let's call this our RAC DB. It's a RAC DB, it's a RAC database. We are not going to create a container database, so I will uncheck this. So there's something a little tricky that we're going to do here when we get here, and I'll show you guys what I mean. Okay, so currently, remember we just got up our installation of grid infrastructure and we used one of our ASM disks, the one we formatted for the CRS, and we called it OCR. So that is the only one it is seeing right now as the location for our database files. And if I browse and I refresh, I don't see any of the disk groups that we created. So what we are going to do right now is I am going to open up as grid, because grid owns them. I have a grid session here open. So which AMCA, ASMCA, which ASM configuration assistant. So I want to open up the ASM configuration assistant and configure these groups that we created. So the data and the FRA. So I would mount them. And then I would come back to this, and then we should be able to assign them to data and our flash recovery areas respectively. So there is a lot of things running behind my laptop right now, which is kind of using up my memory. But let's be patient here. We should be able to get an ASM session, ASMCA session running here. Okay, here we go. Finally, here it comes. All right, so we're back to our ASM configuration assistant. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this kind of helps you configure Oracle ASM instances, disk groups, volume drivers, and things like that. So what I am interested in doing is configuring disk groups. So I would click on this plus. When it drops, it's going to show me just the OCR. But what I want to do is I want to create two more disk groups, right? I want to create the data and the FRA. So I would go ahead and do create. Now, we had defined our Oracle ASM disk discovery path. So the disk group I'm going to create right now is, the first one is data. I would do external, so there's not going to be any redundancy. I would check this one labeled data, and that is what I want to use. So I call it data. So if I hit OK, it should be able to create that, disk group and mount it. Okay, good. So we can now see the data group. So I'm going to do the same thing. I would create the FRA. I can call it FRA. I can call it RICO. Depends on your preference. And I would choose this disk, and I would give it an external redundancy, which is none. So that is good, looking good so far. And then I hit OK. It's going to create that group and it's going to mount it. Okay, good. So if I refresh this, of course, everything is now available and mounted. So that is it for ASMCA. I'm going to close out of it. And then when I return to this, I'm hoping that it might have refreshed enough for me to be able to see that. Let's refresh this. Now I see all of them in here. So I am choosing for the data files. So I would choose the data disk group for the database files. Now, in a few steps, we would choose for the fast recovery area. So I leave it at Oracle managed files. I'll let it be that way. So I would like to configure the fast recovery area. you can skip this if you want and then use it as some sort of an exercise on how to configure your fast recovery area. But I'll just do this right now while I'm here. Of course, it's still OCR, automatic storage management, and defaulting to OCR. I would choose the FRA for the mount point on this one. So I would choose the FRA, and I would probably just give it 10 gig. I'll give it 10 gig. I would enable archiving while I'm at it. It might just take a little while, but I would just go ahead and enable archive lock mode. So let's go ahead and hit next. No further security configurations on data vault and Oracle label security. I would leave the defaults like this. I would look at the sizing. 300, I might just increase this to 500. Character sets, I would leave this defaulted to what it is right now. Connection mode, sample schemas, not really necessary, but hey, I would just go ahead and add this too. So let's go next. I would not configure Enterprise Manager Express, and I would not run cluster verify utility periodically. Let's just go ahead and go next. I would assign the same password for the administrative users, which would be Oracle and Oracle. It doesn't like it, that's fine, but I'll keep it easy. And then I would create the database. Now, at this point, let's go next, and then it's going to give us a summary page, certainly after the prerequisites. It's going to give us a summary page, and then maybe we can see how or what to do if there is any need for us to fix anything. The sun is moving, sorry, that's why my face is kind of cut into half. It's coming on this way, and I don't have enough light coming this way, so. Let's move that down there. All right, so scan field, this one field, none of them is fixable. I would choose to ignore all of them and move forward. All right, summary. So RAC DB on node 1 and node 2, RAC database, the seed is RAC DB, and then of course our configurations. If you go through all of them and you feel comfortable, let's go ahead and hit finish, and that would launch the creation of our database. When this comes up, I'll open up a progress page so that we all can see that. And certainly, if I head onto the Oracle tab, where I run my DBCA, it should be able to give me a location for the DBCA logs. Just give it some time. All right, so we are starting. If you look at this location, it tells you where configuration logs are. Let's do Notepad. Let's do Notepad. So let's open up Notepad. I'm going to paste this here. And my DBCA configuration log is in this location. So this is the trace log. And this is kind of what I am peeling here already, just to see the location. So this process would go until completion. And I would maybe pause the video just in the interest of time. I think the video is already long enough. Let me pause it in the interest of time, and then I would pause it when our database configuration is completed, and then we can check the database out. All right, so we are almost done, 70%. We are at the completion phase. So for each RAC database, every instance has its own alert log. So if you would like, you can duplicate node 1 and then tail, of course, the alert log for that database. So this is the RACDB. It's in the dump destination, trace alert RDB1. So if you want to also take a look at that, that's also something interesting to see. So we're doing post creations right now. The sun is really killing my face here. Let me see if I can fix this. That made it even worse. Okay. Sorry about the lighting. All right, let's see. That seems to be a little bit better. All right, so logs are flying. Let's take a look here and see. Backgrounded processes are beginning to start. All right. Let's take a look here. We should be done. Oh, and we are done actually. Absolutely fantastic. So we are done. Let's close out of this. And let's break out of this one. And let's, so our DBCA completed successfully. Now, so fair enough, if a database is up and running, there is an SMON or a PMON process. So let's go ahead and grep for that, EF, and then we grep for the SMON. So we have some instances running. So RACDB1 is the instance of RACDB on node 1. And similarly, I mean, if we go over to node 2, let's SSH into RAC node 2. And we run a PS minus EF and grep for SMON. We should also see an instance of RAC DB2. So let's go into this database and see if everything is working as planned. So first of all, let's view our etc or a tab file. Usually DBCA creates an entry in the etc or a tab file, but that is not the case. I've noticed that lately with RAC databases, it doesn't do that. So let's go ahead and let's VI into our etc or a tab and create those entries here. Etc or a tab. So with our etc or a tab, let's go down. I would press the I key and then certainly push these two guys down a little bit. So the entries are going to be of the form RAC DB. I'll put it in small letters, RAC DB. And then our Oracle Home U01 app, Oracle product 12.2.0.1 DB home _1 and N. And then I would create a corresponding entry for the instance specific. So I would take this over on this way and then do RAC DB1. I like doing that on a RAC system because if you only source your environment with the database name, you will not be able to get into SQL. You will get into SQL plus assist DBA, but it's going to show you an idle instance because there is no instance of RAC DB running on this node. There is an instance of RAC DB1, which is, you know, the node 1 instance for RAC DB. So you want to be mindful of that. So let me save this and I'll add the same entry into, I think I had Oracle somewhere on node 2 here. So I'll VI into the etc or a tab, and then I would add the same entry here. So I And for this instance, which is node 2, it's instance 2, because for rack instances, they are appended with the instance number. So let's go ahead and get into our database here now that we've sourced our environment. So rack db1. So SQL plus ask sysdba. All right, so we are connected to our instance. So let's select our instance name, status. Let's do version as well from our GV dollar, which is a global view. So this tells me rack db1 is open and it's running on that. So let's select name from the dollar data file. So it has 5 data files. So there you have it, folks. We have successfully gone through our series. And just as a recap, we went through all the different tasks that we assigned here. So we prepared the server, cloned the server, allocated ASM, installed grid infrastructure, and now we deployed our Oracle RAC 12c database, a 2-node, database, 2 instances running on both nodes. So I'm happy you were able to stay with me until the end of this series. And if you like it, again, I cannot stress how important enough it is for you to hit that like button, and how important it is for you to subscribe and enable notifications so that content like this should be brought to you immediately we release them. Thank you very much for watching.